Hi, welcome. My name is actually Nele Heise. I am the host of the session, but let's not talk about this. We have other things to discuss today. Yeah, welcome to this panel. We're very glad to be here and to talk about music streaming with you, hopefully. So before I start with a short introduction, let me explain the Opus modus operandi. That is how we call it. We will have a short introduction, as I said, and then I will be joined by these three wonderful speakers here on stage, and they will give a short explanation of their perspectives on music streaming and their projects, which are really interesting. And one part of that would be, for example, Ariana, Peter, and Andreas. And after that, after those short lightning talks, we will hopefully have like 30 minutes for discussion, and we want to invite you to join the conversation. So after the talks are finished, please grab a mic if you have questions or comments. Yeah, just join our discussion. Okay, the question is why I am here. Nele Heise, University of Hamburg. I'm a media researcher, and naturally I'm interested in what people do with music or other stuff online. So this is part of my research, is looking at podcasts. This has nothing to do with streaming, actually. Maybe the connection is with Andreas, who's a good friend of mine. But I'm a consumer of music, and I'm a big fan of streaming services. And to give you an impression how this affects my life on an everyday basis, these are three artists, Thundercat, FKA Twigs, and Wolfpack, who I've discovered via the Discover Weekly feature on Spotify. And I not only listen to their music regularly, but I also go to the concerts, buy tickets, buy CDs from them. So these are just three examples from musicians that came to me magically via the algorithm of Spotify. And as a study which has been published 3 or 4 weeks ago on ResearchGate showed that the adoption of streaming leads to very large increases in the quantity and diversity of music consumption. So there are some hints in the research that shows that music streaming really changes the way people discover music, and also the way they are exposed to different kinds of music. Maybe to give you some idea of the state of the stream. As you can see on the left side, this is an overview over the streaming service subscription revenue in Germany. And as you can see, we had a massive increase in the last years, or last 2 or 3 years. As you can see, considering all the music sales in 2016, the subscription revenue makes about a quarter of those music sales. So we can say this has really been established in the last years. And when we look at the global market share of music streaming services, it's no surprise that Spotify dominates the arena. But Apple Music, they are about 20%, and then you have Deezer, but all the other services are like not so relevant players. But these are the most relevant services we are talking about today. Now, German perspective, the talk is in English, but we are in Berlin. Germans are a bit slow when it comes to the adoption of digital services, but this is a snapshot from last year's AD/ZDF online survey, and as you can see here, music streaming services aren't adopted that much, but considerably larger adoption rates among younger users. So apparently maybe there's a change now coming up in the next years. Other relevant services are music portals. Again, younger users adopt these services a bit more than older users. And what I find really interesting, that 89% of young onliners are using music via YouTube, which I found strange, but I'm not so young, so maybe this is a behavior that younger people are more prone to. And obviously also music identification services are relevant, a relevant point of access to music. Okay, this was just a short overview over what's going on in the music streaming arena. And now we will begin with our first speaker, Arianna, explaining her perspective as a journalist and musician on music streaming services.
Thank you very much. So welcome everybody first, nice that you're here. So as a musician in my private life and as a journalist, music journalist in my business life, I'm kind of a split personality. And during my time at the Rolling Stone, I focused on newcomers. And when you write about a newcomer, what you have to provide to the reader is that you have to describe what the music sounds like so that the reader knows what this new artist is about. And I have always found it quite tricky and difficult to label music in a way that an algorithm would do, because I felt like, okay, you have different criteria, you have your knowledge and the experience about music, and then you have to describe whether something sounds more like post-rock or more like shoegaze. And that brought me to the algorithm of Spotify and Discover Weekly, which you may all know. It's a service that is provided to the heavy users of Spotify every Monday. And it's a playlist, a personalized playlist with a playtime of 2 hours and about 30 songs. And you can see on Twitter, we have slides here, and oh, I can do myself. Nice. You have to go to the laptop. To dir, okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, so these are just 2 tweets that can be an example how people on social media go crazy about Discover Weekly. They even want to marry the playlist because they find it so suitable to their taste. And I really wanted to know how Spotify is doing this. How can they succeed to such a good strike rate? And so, the algorithm that Spotify uses for Discover Weekly is called EchoNest. Yeah, this is the algorithm behind it. And so EchoNest works with 3 elements. The first one is the taste profile. So you have to be aware that Spotify collects every click that you have ever done on the service. So Spotify knows about every song that you have ever listened to. At any time, even the Nickelback songs and the songs that you probably don't want to know people that you're listening to. So you have a taste profile, and this is collected by the songs that you click to and your libraries and your playlists, of course. And so you have one taste profile, and Spotify compares your taste profile to all the other users' profiles. And so if you have, and of course there are bubbles of other users who have a similar taste like you have. And if, for example, you have a playlist with 5 songs and other users who have a similar taste like you have also have those 5 songs and playlists together with a 6th song that you don't know by now, then it's highly likely that Discover Weekly should suggest this 6th song to you as well. The second element on which the algorithm is built on is an audio scan. So this is what interested me the most, because it's how music is deconstructed into minor key, major key, into speed, into tempo change, into instruments and all this stuff. And what you get after this deconstruction is just a bunch of numbers and matrices. It takes a week for Spotify to do the next Discover Weeklies because it's so many data. And this is about how sound is being deconstructed into numbers. And the third pillar, or the third category on which the algorithm is built on, is the text scan. So what EchoNest does is that it scans all texts on the internet, social media, Facebook, Twitter. If somebody is writing about a new favorite band on a Facebook post, then the text scan can scan the words that the user is writing and using for this description. For example, they can scan the words, listen to this new band, it's my favorite song at the moment, and then they can take the words favorite and amazing and listen to it and stuff like that, and can tell what is going viral at the moment, for example. Or if a music magazine or a blog writes about a new band and describes how the music sounds like, for example, it sounds like, I don't know, old school hip hop from the beginning of the 80s, then text scan can tell that obviously this band sounds a bit like old school music because a human being is labeled like this. And with these three elements, Spotify can provide this amazing and very impressive Discover Weekly playlist that is personalized to your taste. This is just a quick look on the Echo tree. It's a bit insane if you ask me, but also very impressive because this is the genre taxonomy of Spotify, of Echo Nest. I don't know if you can read. Yeah. You can see there are 1,600 genres at the moment, I guess. You can see how the machine put music and sound, something that is very intuitive and emotional, into labels. And there are names like CCM or B64 and names for genres that I have never heard of. And you can also see interesting links. So what I found out through this genre tree is that deep Taiwanese pop is very similar to German Volksmusik. So, and contemporary country has a lot to do with music that is labeled as Fußball. So it's very interesting what the machine calculates. Yeah, so as amazing and sophisticated this algorithm may be, of course, what I want to put into the discussion is whether this kind of music makes the listener lazy. Because if you have these personalized, tailored, and customized playlists for your needs, then everything that you have to do is just click play and listen to what a machine shows for you. And there are critics, for example, Ben Ratliff from the New York Times, who even wrote a book about it, who say, even if I like half of the songs in my playlist, it always feels very flat, and I feel infantilized to a child who's being given something in a very passive way. And so and I can say the same about me. Sometimes I wonder how a machine can reveal what I like in this way, but there is something about it that still feels a bit wrong. So yeah, maybe you have your own experiences with this playlist as well. Yeah, so these are the critics that I wrote down. I'm sure there are much more, and yeah, we'll be very happy to discuss about this with you.
Yes, thanks, Ariana. Next up, Andreas. You need the clicker, I guess. Okay, Andreas has a PhD in media studies. Yeah, that's not Andreas. Okay, and he's also head of Analog Soul, or one of the heads of Analog Soul, and will tell us something about how they experimented on how streaming may change the music itself.
Thank you. We are actually a small indie label from Leipzig, and the label is run by artists who are on the label. So our perspective is not so much like a label perspective in terms of we have money and promote music. So we're musicians without any money and promote ourselves. So just to have this framing of my perspective. So when I say label, then sorry guys, if any one of you makes music, you don't have any much money. So, but what we wanted to find out was whether streaming as a distribution of music has the potential to shape music itself. Because when we discuss streaming, we from an artist perspective, we mostly speak about the revenue. So because streaming gives you a very, very little revenue out of it, and this is like the most burning topic for an artist when talking about streaming. But we wanted to put it a step away from this discussion and asking ourselves and asking our artistical network and our musicians if they want to figure out how streaming might change the music. And actually this has quite history. Because a lot of the things we know about music, and ever since music was recorded or distributed, this technology and also those economical circumstances shaped the music. Like far on the left, there are those wax rolls from Edison, and how the size of them limited the time a music or a track could run, or the diameter of a vinyl. It limits or it shapes the length of an album. Some of the most interesting albums have been are shaped by this length. For example, things by Red Hot Chili Peppers I just read on Wikipedia this morning, for example. And also, what we should not forget is the radio. Like a proper single is about 3 minutes 30 seconds, and it has a ramp where the DJ could speak on and things like this. And interestingly, those things shape music as we know it, like the length of the single, the length of the EP, the length of the album, and those are very surprisingly stable, those conditions, although the way we consume music changed so much. And a very smart person from New York, a singer-songwriter and also Professor Mike Errico, he just pointed out the question, so what is the boundary of streaming? Since it's not a time boundary, right? You can upload whatever length you want. You can upload albums with 1,000 songs. But the hard boundary, the hard limit of streaming is the revenue, like the business model. And the revenue is like 0.2 or 0.8 cents per stream. And the interesting thing, and that's what he pointed out, you get paid after 30 seconds playing time. And so he figured out with this number, and he asked the question, is a musician, do we screw ourselves when we make songs that are longer than 30 seconds, right? Shouldn't we sell a single as 6 songs? Having a 3 minute 30 song and then make 6 portions out of 30 seconds out of it. And this question is very clever, and there have been artists already who made use of this. On the left is Wolfpack. Nele already introduced them as one act she discovered on Spotify. They made this great Sleepify project where they had an album with 10 tracks, and all of them were silent. And you could run this album on repeat whole day or whole night on your computer, and they earned a revenue out of it. And they asked their fans to do so. So this was Sleepify. And this is a project from UK punk rockers, and they made one album with 130-second tracks. And we really like this punk attitude when thinking about how can we figure out how streaming might change the music. And then we asked our network to compose songs or tracks which are not longer or which are exactly 31 seconds, like 1 second longer as you need. So, and yeah, you can listen to the result on Analog Soul.de/31 seconds or 31s. I also put 2 songs, but it doesn't work here. Oh, no, it works. This one. The PA is not so bad, actually. Let's give it a second try. So this was one example, and I took two extreme examples. This was one. I'll give you a second. So those are two examples, and you can figure out on this Spotify playlist, and it's 31 songs. But how does that sound? What is music worth that is 31 seconds long, like the time you get paid as an artist on streaming platform like Spotify for it? And I mean, you can figure out it's not enough to establish a musical idea in a song. That's what our artist said. It's a nice thing to play with, but it doesn't feel like a song to them, and it is not from the structure, as you could hear. What happens is you get things like skits or tools or intros, and it almost feels like this pre-listening stuff you got on Amazon and iTunes, for example. And that's the format makes music pretty in that terms like industrial. And yeah, that was our big result out of it, that like the value of music doesn't stop after those 31 seconds after you get paid. It needs obviously more time. And this is something I want to bring in our discussion. What effects streaming has on music and how we might change business models in order to not have negative effects on the music itself. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Andreas. Our last of the three speakers is Peter. And Peter is one of the founders of Resonate, which is an alternative streaming music cooperative. And we will talk a bit about changes in artist payment and participation of users. But Peter, go for yourself.
Thank you. So the question here is, with endlessly available content, where's the gravity in music streaming connecting us with the artists? And this is something I discovered using the platform I built, was I felt a new weight to the experience of music streaming. And I'll get to what that's about in just a moment. So first of all, why another streaming service? And being Republica, I get to kind of cut to the chase and say the reason is that we have a corporate governance model for culture with the existing streaming services. So the corporate business model dictates what the platform does and how the content is consumed. So with Resonate, we're going to do the opposite, and that's to create a cooperative governance model for culture. And so what that means in the realest terms is that everyone that joins is a shareholder as a cooperative. I'm the founder and I have one share, and as a label owner, he's got a share, and I think you've technically got another share because you're also an artist distributing through the platform, and all of the fans as well, in addition to all the workers that build code and such. Why this matters is that recently streaming has surpassed physical objects in terms of total sales. And so there's a lot of speculation that because it's been this rebound in the music industry that's suddenly making the music industry profitable again, that what we're going to end up happening is that all of the other channels are going to start to kind of dwindle down, and we're going to end up with streaming, and then there's going to be consolidation in the streaming business, and we're going to end up with a couple of access points to all music, and it won't become about ownership anymore, it'll become about access. Don't have a lot of time to go into why I think that's a little bit disturbing, but let's move on to talking about a different model for streaming, and that's stream to own. And that's the model we're in beta right now. And we've taken the whole thing and turned it upside down on its head. And what I found when I did my initial research on this was that the big problem with payments and why there's so much controversy around all of this is that with the monthly subscription model, it's really hard to reconcile all the different listening patterns and come up with a fair system for paying artists. And so by moving away from monthly subscription and going to a top-up model where you put down 5 or 10 euros, we can do fair payments, we can do the same payment to everybody for every play. And so basically what we've done is we broke up the price of a download over 9 plays. So you put in a 5 or 10 euro balance, and then you start listening. And then for each time that you listen to the same song, the price starts to go up a little bit until you've reached the 9th play. At that point, you own the song, You don't have to pay for it again from us, and you could even access the file if you want to. The really interesting thing about how the formula works is that you kind of get two distinct phases. You've got a discovery phase and a fan phase. In the discovery phase, it's super cheap. It can be as little as $2 to $4 a month, and you're getting to know new work and new artists. And then when you get to the more like the fan phase, if you really like a particular song, that's when you start paying a bit more, and you reach that price of a download. And this is where the gravity thing comes in. And it's been really exciting to actually start working with this. And I listen like 2 or 3 hours a day. It's funny because, they gave me their catalog, and I didn't want to listen to it. I actually wanted to wait until I got it in the app because I need to test the app. And I've become big fans of a couple of your artists as a result of this model. And I think that what we're looking at with this endlessly available content stream that comes from Spotify, YouTube, et cetera, is that there's not a lot of gravity. There's not a lot of connection to artists anymore because you can constantly just skip from one thing to the other. But by changing the whole business model around to where these little microtransactions occur and you can look and see, oh, that's the 3rd time I've heard that song. And wait, I've paid them just a little bit more than the last time I listened to it. And you can feel like, oh, I've hit the 4th and 5th listen of the same song, and now I'm like realizing I'm supporting this artist now because I'm giving them more money than they can make on other platforms. The math for the regular streaming market is pretty horrible. You have to, as a purely independent artist, you have to have your song listened to 150 times to equal the cost of a download. And so while streaming on the whole has led to more profits in the music industry, for artists like his, it's actually you're suffering because the per stream rates that you get with these other platforms are so small that the chances are you're never going to reach 150 plays on the same song by one fan in order to reach that price. So contact info, and I look forward to the discussion. Cool.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Maybe, we click to the next slide. These were actually our 3 perspectives on music streaming. Thanks a lot. And as I said, we will now have also time if you have questions or if you have a comment or want to know much more. Do we have a mic here in the room? Ah, perfect. Okay, just raise your hand. We have someone who assists with that. Thanks to you all. I think these perspectives kind of come together at some point, and we will find out now where these points are. But Arianna, when I read your Rolling Stone article on how Spotify calculates on music taste, I've noticed that you use 2 words to describe this kind of algorithmic music recommendations: creepy and terrifying. What is so scary about, Discover Weekly or similar systems? What makes you have nightmares about this?
Maybe sometimes I have nightmares that I like some of the songs. Maybe that's creepy. Well, the thing is, the thing about genre in general maybe is that music is about emotion. I don't know that people who say, oh, I like this song because it's a post-rock song and it's not a, new gay song or whatever. People like a song because they like a song. And what an algorithm tries to do is to deconstruct a song into little pieces, so that into numbers. And I just find it extremely unnatural, and even if the suggestions sometimes fit your taste, it's a bit scary that this machine is putting music into something like this, because and also music taste changes by time, and also I think that genres are getting less and less important. People are listening to music in different situations, in different moods, different times, different forms of a day. And so it's weird to say, okay, here is this curated hip-hop playlist, and then you can listen to hip hop like 2 hours, but you don't. There's nothing to discover yourself anymore, and maybe that's a bit weird for me. That you have this genre tree, which is very impressive, but also not the way that people perceive music, I would say.
Okay, so you feel like you're in a musical echo chamber or something like that, sort of this typical filter bubble effect, which accounts now also for music and musical taste, maybe. Yeah, but if we look at it from another perspective, you could say, okay, now these platforms, they account for users' tastes, for their emotions, and they like want to get to know you, all of this stuff. Yeah, wouldn't it be? If you compare it with classical or with traditional radio DJs, for example, the classical taste makers, wouldn't you say that these new possibilities to discover music are like a democratization or liberation of taste making? Isn't there also this point that now users are taken into account in another direction?
Well, I'm not so. Oh, me. Sorry. I'm not so critical in a way that I would say people should not listen to Discovery Weekly or something like that. I think people always have the choice to choose the music themselves. They can go out, they can go into record stores and discover something themselves. So I wouldn't say it's a threat, because you can also see this as an addition. And of course, 20 years ago, people went to a record store, and there was the shop assistant, and you also got suggestions from a person, and then you were listening to 10 different records, and then maybe you liked 1 or 2 of them. And maybe it's the same with this algorithm. You get 30 songs, and maybe you like 5 of them, and then you're happy. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad. The only thing that I criticize is whether you can approach music from this way, whether you can say, you can put music into playlists just because the numbers of the mattresses told them so. Because, for example, what genre are the Beatles, or what genre is David Bowie? Where would you put this? And so I think that you can't put music into those kind of numbers, I would say. But still, of course, it's a chance, because you can still be your own person, you can still choose yourself, and you can choose wisely. And maybe technology is an addition. Maybe it's the same discussion that we had when television came up and people were afraid that people won't read books anymore. This is not true, it's just something that is an addition. It won't replace the way we listened to music before, but maybe you just have to be very aware. Yeah.
Of how it works.
Yes.
Peter, you have...
Yeah, I think I was just going to jump in on this notion of algorithmic curation versus human curation. And the point about human curation is that it's unexpected. I feel very lucky to be pre-digital when it comes to my experience and history with music. And to me, the people that really turned me on to stuff, it was the things that they turned me on to was stuff that I didn't know I was going to like. And that changed my perspective about what you could do with whether, you know, a guitar and a bass and drums, or, you know, something else entirely. And I think that's something that's missing from this algorithmic curation. And I hope that that's something we'll be able to do, and like you said, to democratize curation in a way that puts that human element back in, because, you know, it's too sanitary. It's like the Walmart of, to use an American reference, it's the Walmart of, you know, music consumption. It's too generic.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there too, because actually there is one feature within Spotify where you can do this, like the user-created playlists. And for us as a label, those user-created playlists, they become so important because it's one of the most important promotional tools nowadays, which 10 years ago this would have been the music blog. Then you would send it to the blogger, which would have been the tastemaker then, like the new radio DJ 10 years ago was a music blogger, and now it's the playlist maker or the playlist curator. And then it's also human. So and some of them are like really, really powerful. Like I don't know, for example, from hip hop, you have one playlist, German rap, best of German rap or something, which is monthly. And if you have a track there, you know it has like 20,000 plays, like almost instantly, because the list is subscribed by so much users. But on the other hand, just coming back to your question, is this not a democratization? I would say this is the problem, because what are the economical and also like data circumstances where this happens in, and this is not democracy at all, because like Peter mentioned in the talk before we had at lunch, he's like the business model of Spotify is not a subscription, it's like selling the data.
But it's technically it's about selling stock. That's what Spotify's business model is. It's not about making money off of music, it's about their IPO. But one of their main revenue streams is around the aggregation of data profiles on listeners.
Which is a good point. I want to come back later that you or Resonate works in open source ethos. I really find it interesting. But we have a comment here from the audience.
Hello.
Interaction. Yes.
Hello. Yeah, Peter just mentioned what I wanted to say. Hello, Peter. Dennis here. I don't fear the algorithm at all, because it's always the same thing. It has always been through history the same thing. People tell you something and you just mentioned it. I don't fear that people don't look for something they have never seen. I mean, it's like, if we are humans, we will always search for something. An algorithm will not tell us. We'll always search and go for something. It's always the same thing. Like when you listen to radio, you listen to your favorite radio because you want to listen to your radio. That's the algorithm. So I don't fear this. And if you're a music lover, you will go somewhere. And if someone is a music lover, he will send you a link and tell you this is wonderful. What I fear is the data. That's the problem. If one day you're listening to Spotify and you listen, I don't know, maybe you're listening to punk rock all of your day, and people know your political idea also. That's what I don't like about this. So the algorithm for me is perfect. It's wonderful. It's made by humans. It's there to help you. So well, you just said it, the data collecting, and you are giving data to people who make money. That's what I don't like about it.
And that's what I meant by the corporate governance model for culture, is that the corporation sees you as an asset and nothing more. And so that's why we're pushing a totally different perspective on that. It is very, very scary. I know someone who actually read the terms and conditions and left the platform. I mean, who does this? Nobody reads the terms and conditions anything. I think it takes like 3 to 4 months. If you read all the terms from all the apps you use, it would take 3 to 4 months of your year, and you'd have to do it again the next year.
Well, you have to read it and understand it one more year.
And you have to understand it too. That's not just reading it. Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, this is, and it's going to be really interesting what happens, like 2018 in the EU, if that's going to have an impact on the way that these businesses operate in terms of data collection. But we'll see.
But yes, Peter, as I said before, you follow another road, I'd say, with Resonate regarding openness, transparency. At least this is what I read on your website. Could you explain a bit more on this, what you do, or with data, for example?
Well, it's still very, very early days. So we are collecting data, I mean, because we're looking at the way that the player works. But when we really go live, the goal is to be able to make everything opt-in, not opt-out. So if you want to be a fully anonymous user and not have any of your data, saved, you could do that. And so where it becomes an advantage is that if you want to create a communication channel with an artist, and so you want the artist to actually know where you are, because maybe you want to get a show alert. You want to find out that they're coming to your town. But this is a part of the cooperative kind of model, is treating everyone as an equal member. And
Yeah, this was something I was interested in as well. So, how do you create this connection between artists and fans? I mean, this is something for you as Analog Soul, as a label, or let's say network or platform, which is interesting as well. So, the question of local connections, for example, I think you are part of Listen to Leipzig. Yes. How can these global companies reflect on the relevance of local specifics or subcultural specifics, for example? Is that something that plays a role for you as well as a label?
Well, in the beginning of this whole like internet and streaming stuff, like when we started almost 10 years ago, it was thrilling for us to see, wow, somebody from New Zealand played you, or from Canada or something, which was like totally strange for us as really small indie artists. But then we figured out this whole world of music blogs, and then they had some of those blog connections where there was a network of international music blogs, and each month one blog created they created a monthly playlist, and every blog out of this network contributed one track from the country. And so we started figuring out how those connections work and how to get in contact with people. But the thing with streaming is we as artists have almost no insight. There is now Spotify stats. There are some stats you can look at into your albums or playlists you create, but it's definitely not the kind of connection you get, for example, on SoundCloud. Which is something which works, at least in my understanding, and how our fans use it, or the networks we are in use it, more like a community, where you share tracks, where you comment on tracks, where you comment on the music. And this is something which usually doesn't happen on those big streaming devices, big streaming services. And most of them don't have any message function or something. You can follow a profile, but the profile cannot follow back in that sense, because the artist profile cannot follow back the listener profiles. So those platforms became, in that sense, a setback for us in terms of creating connection, because this is something we've always been good in, to create connection with the people. So we had small fan bases, but with high connection, and we did not lose this on streaming, but we don't get anything back out of it except from the revenue share we see in the end of the month, where was it streamed or in which countries. I'm looking forward if Resonate is going to get bigger and more people are going into it, if those connections like Peter discovering our music through the app and reporting us on it will become more.
You have a comment on that?
Well, one thing that I wanted to say is, talking about data privacy, is that it's not only about personal data, but also data bubbles. And we talked about this earlier at lunch, that Spotify has the information about every song that is clicked by any person at any time ever since they subscribed on the platform. And so it's not only about your privacy, but also about facts like Spotify knows which songs are being streamed in Berlin, Neukölln on a Friday night from 10 o'clock to midnight, for example. And so they know what kind of music people like in Berlin, Neukölln compared to Munich, for example. And companies definitely will be interested in this kind of data. For example, for advertising, for commercials. So they know which kind of songs are popular in which area, and I think that this is very relevant in terms of data privacy.
But will it lead to, I mean, with all this data available, Andreas just said you don't actually have that much data on usage patterns, so does it influence the shape and structure of popular music? I mean, it would be nice to see the patterns that are most popular, and musicians are orienting the stuff on that. Are there plans for a Spotify optimized album or something?
I mean, we know this kind of algorithm in an analog way, right? Because if you look at, for example, those end 90s Ibiza mainstream techno pop songs, they all sound like they were curated from an algorithm, right? And from a kind of stupid algorithm, because it's stupid in terms of how much maths goes actually into. So if we talk about taste, for example, or what is popular, I think we have, ever since music is distributed in a mass market, since like beginning of the 20th century, we have those algorithms already at work in a very simplistic way, I would say, to say like give it 4 to the floor, and then here we need a rise, and there we need a bridge, and we need female vocals in the refrain and things like this. And but definitely there would be people interested to have a algorithmically, ideally shaped song, like when do people, and then it would be interesting for me as also like a media scientist or also a sociologist point of view, what are the criteria they put in to say this is a successful song. And like I know the music industry, the criterion would be when do people click away. So we will, if we would have music generated based on this user behavior, then it would be probably music just like elevator music. It would be music that does not disturb anyone, but it wouldn't be music that inspires anyone.
Just as a comment, I'm thinking of Jan Böhmermann, Menschen, Leben, Tanzen, Welt. Maybe you've heard of this. It just came into my mind. That is a very good example for this. So this is kind of the
monkey algorithm,
yeah,
in that case. So
yeah.
He made monkeys decide upon the text of a popular or a pop tune.
And it's a bloody earworm, by the way.
Yeah, it's really catchy. So the monkeys did their job very well. So, but when we talk about streaming, we also talk about licensing. And I'm not a musician. I mean, I have some ukulele tracks on Spotify, but no, on SoundCloud. Oh God, Spotify, no. But this is a private matter, so please don't Google it. However, yes. Streaming, I think, so when we talked 3 years ago, Andreas, for example, many musicians or artists were like really concerned about going on Spotify, putting the music out there, mostly based on the business model. So, and we all know this things like Jay-Z pulling all of his tracks from Apple Music, I think, and Spotify it was. So maybe Peter, can you tell us a bit more about why, for example, artists and musicians come to Resonate and want to be part of the cooperative? Is it more about sustainable business and getting more revenue, or is it really also a political decision or idealistic decision?
Oh, there definitely is a political side, I'm sure. I mean, as an electronica producer myself who went through that experience in the mid-2000s when Spotify, or rather SoundCloud, changed their business model and suddenly half of my catalog was gone unless I decided to pay them for hosting. It's like, this is the prime example for me personally, and I think that most producers and bands and stuff have been through something like this with a platform, and that's where having some kind of voice is fundamental. And I think that's a big draw, as well as the possibility that maybe we'll make more revenue. But I hope it's also about that being able to open up more pathways and communication channels. You know, if a band comes to us and says, hey, we're using this new app that allows us to send whatever to our fans, could you somehow integrate it? You know, as long as we've got the resources to do so, and I would like to do that. You know, and I think that could provide a lot more opportunity. And the fact that they can ask that question and have it considered, and maybe even like say, well, we've got to actually take that to a vote because that's causes some other problems, so let's ask the community to vote on it. You know, that kind of democratic process, you know, you don't get anywhere else. So I think that is a big appeal to why people are coming in.
Yeah, speaking of stream of consciousness, consciousness of streaming, I mean, this is something you have to explain to users. And if we look at the data, and especially younger users are really enjoying the pleasures of having like a small amount of money every month and paying that, you have to like you lose the idea of what it means for the artists when you stream this stuff on these big platforms, I think. So it's kind of educational, I'd say, what you try to achieve, I think. We are just, I think we're running a bit out of time, but of course you are invited to ask some questions. So, over there, yes. Please, men in the second row.
Hey there. Peter, I was wondering, how big is the share that the artists receive at the end of the day with your platform? Because I think this is the main problem about Spotify. It's not the 10 euros per month. That's perfect amount. It's just 9 euros going to marketing and 1 euro goes to the artists.
Well, I mean, actually, the payout is much more dramatic than that. Spotify is paying out 70 to like 83%, I think, is the total number of their revenue is going out. It's just that the way it's being distributed, a lot of it's ending up at the major labels, and there's no equality in terms of how it gets broken down. Kudos to Deezer. They're considering what's known as the listener-centric model, which would make the distribution of funds based on what you're actually listening to, not the way the pie is divided up. SpotifyArtist.com has the chart that explains how they do it, and it's really complicated. So that's part of it. With us, it's totally one-to-one in terms of, because it's a different process. You're topping up, and so when a deduction occurs from a play, it goes into that artist account instantly. I think I missed you had another kind of...
How much is the revenue at Resonate for the artist?
Our calculations are 2.5 times more, kind of on a conservative. We did really conservative numbers, and it was all estimations because we don't really know. We won't know for another 3 or 4 months until we were able to look at the data on it.
Andreas.
But there's also another part of it too, is that equality. Like, you mentioned that users skipping a track at like halfway through. By having repeat plays and knowing how many fans you've got that are listening to 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and paying that much more, you really know who your fans are, and you know what songs are really meaningful to your audience.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because one might think that Spotify and those services, they calculate like every played song is put in the revenue, but it's not the case. Like, because Spotify, and you could go into this, you could have a look at Google. There were some interesting articles. Spotify actually kind of was blackmailed by the 3 big major labels worldwide, and they had some specific contracts, and they had to agree to put like Sony, I would say 20% on top than the other 3 major labels or something. So every one of the big major labels has an own contract with Spotify, and in this contract it's written down how much of the revenue is going to the labels. So and estimated 35% of the music worldwide is music made by indies, like acts not on one of the 3 companies, big label publishing corps, and that's something we should not mix together. Actually, there are not many services out there who are like that basic and clear in their structure, that you click it and then the artist gets paid. Unfortunately that's not a standard model, not yet. So.
Okay, I think there was another question. Is it answered yet? No. Then a quick one, please.
Yeah, I was wondering if you have any. This one goes to Paul. I was wondering if you have any other revenue streams in your business model, like let's say tracking or whatever it could be.
You said tracking?
Yeah, like tracking, or like if you receive any data from users and sell them to thirds.
No, that'll never be a revenue stream for us. We have no interest in that whatsoever. I don't want it, and as long as I'm running the company, it'll never be there. But there are lots of other opportunities where we could work with other startups. We've had about 40 sign up to work with us in the future for ticketing or merchandise or VR, AR, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. The opportunities out there. And yeah, and in the future, it may be that streaming is just a loss leader where it ends up being totally free, but there's so many other ways for an artist to make a living that we don't need to actually charge for streaming. I mean, that's an eventuality. It's possible.
Thanks.
Okay, you're happy with that? Thanks. I mean, there's plenty of time to talk about the business model behind Resonate after this session, but unfortunately, we're running out of time today. Maybe we have a quick, short round of statements. What are the biggest challenges in music streaming ahead? Really quick.
Really quick, something you mentioned actually, I think we need to talk, to explain also to the artists and to the listeners better how these services work and how the politics and economics of these services are.
What he said.
I would say listeners should not get lazy, but we also have a best of both worlds. So a curated playlist or a music journalist can go to shows and see things that an algorithm can't do, but an algorithm can calculate millions of songs that a human being can't do, so maybe we can have both.
Okay, thanks. And maybe we could end this session with something you mentioned in your article, Ariana, actually, which fits quite well to this year's Republica's motto, Laugh Out Loud, because apparently Spotify now allows you to check on Tinder if the music tastes of the potential subject and your music taste fit to each other. So maybe streaming is also something about bringing people together, spreading love and stuff like that. So emotional experiences. Yeah, considering my own relationship, I'm not sure about that as well. So, however, I want to encourage you all to keep on supporting artists, buying CDs, go to Resonate, go to Analog Soul, listen to Ariana's very cool music on SoundCloud. I really enjoyed it. And yes, keep on supporting the artists and music you like and care about, because this is also something about love and not only about the bad data and algorithm and stuff. So thank you all for coming here today. Let's give a warm round of applause to our speakers, to Andreas Bischof, to Harris and Ariana Zustra. My name is Nele Heise. Thanks and enjoy the rest of the conference.